At 60 years old, Alan Prescott didn't expect life to begin again. He had lived a long, quiet life in Oregon, retired early from his job as a civil engineer, long divorced, estranged from his only son, and mostly alone. His days were measured. By the time between his morning coffee and his evening walk, and the silence inside his suburban house was sometimes so heavy it felt like it might suffocate him. But everything changed the day he received a phone call that he almost didn't answer. On the other end of the line was Mia, his son's ex-wife. They hadn't spoken in nearly 6 years. Not since the bitter divorce between her and Nathan, Alan's son. It had been a complicated marriage, full of passionate highs and explosive lows. Alan had only met Mia a handful of times, always at holiday dinners where tension sat heavier than the turkey on the table. After the divorce, Alan had kept his distance, unsure of what was appropriate, and then simply drifted away. Now, Mia's voice was shaking on the phone. She said, "I don't know who else to call. I need help. I'm pregnant. And Nathan's gone." Alan sat frozen, the words slow to register. She explained that Nathan had cut ties with her after discovering the pregnancy, insisting the child wasn't his. She was alone in a small town in Northern California, barely scraping by, with no family left and a baby on the way. Alan didn't ask many questions. He simply said, "I'll come." That weekend, he packed a small bag and drove 8 hours south. Not because he believed it was his responsibility, not because he thought he could fix anything, but because something inside him, something human and still alive, told him he needed to go. When Alan arrived, Mia looked different. Thinner, paler. Her eyes sunken not just from lack of sleep but from something deeper, abandonment. She was 7 months pregnant, working double shifts at a diner, barely able to keep her tiny apartment heated. She didn't cry when he walked in. She simply said thank you, and for a moment, Alan saw a younger version of her, the bright, sharp woman he remembered from long ago. Alan stayed in her apartment that first night on the couch. The second night, he helped fix a leak under the sink. By the third, he was buying groceries and timing her contractions. He didn't even realize it had become routine. They didn't talk much about Nathan. It was too raw, too confusing. Alan couldn't understand how his son could walk away not just from Mia, but from his own child. And yet, part of him wasn't surprised. Nathan had always been restless, always afraid of permanence. The baby came early. A girl, healthy, pink, and loud. Mia named her Lily. Alan was in the room when it happened. He held her hand. He cut the cord. He cried without meaning to. In the hospital room, with fluorescent lights and sterile blankets, he looked at Mia, her face pale but glowing, and at the baby in her arms, and he whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Over the next weeks, Alan never left. He moved into Mia's apartment, sleeping on the floor between boxes and baby clothes. He cooked. He cleaned. He rocked Lily to sleep for hours at night. Mia was recovering slowly, her body bruised by labor, her emotions even more fragile. They didn't define what they were. Mia didn't ask and Alan didn't offer. They were just there, present. Building something WORDLESSLY. The neighbors began to whisper. A few older women on the block speculated in hushed tones at the grocery store. "Isn't that her ex-father-in-law?" one of them said. Another muttered, "He's too old to be raising a child. It's not normal." And then one day, Mia posted a photo online. It was of Alan holding Lily in the park, sun casting a golden halo around his white hair. The caption read, "Family is who shows up." The post went viral. Within days, comment sections exploded. Some praised him as a hero. Others accused them of having an inappropriate relationship. A few asked if Mia was manipulating him. Others admired the courage it took to rewrite a broken story. Thousands debated, was it love, obligation, something else entirely? Alan never replied. He didn't need to explain himself to the internet. All he knew was that every night, when Lily wrapped her tiny fingers around his and Mia fell asleep on the couch beside them, he felt more alive than he had in decades. The line between obligation and affection began to blur. Sometimes, Alan would find Mia watching him, her expression soft, grateful. Sometimes she would fall asleep with her head on his shoulder. On quiet mornings, they drank coffee on the porch and shared stories about the past, laughing more than either of them expected. Still, Alan wrestled with guilt. Was he replacing his son? Was he betraying some invisible boundary? But when he watched Mia cradle Lily, when he felt the baby's breath against his chest, he knew this wasn't about boundaries. It was about showing up for a child, for a woman, for a broken family that still wanted to heal. And slowly, the world outside faded. Spring arrived gently. The days grew warmer, and with each passing week, Lily began to recognize Alan's voice. Her eyes followed him as he moved across the room. She laughed at his silly songs. She calmed when he held her. She called him her first attempt at grandpa, perhaps. Or something else entirely. Alan had never imagined being this close to a baby again. He had missed most of Nathan's infancy, buried in work and ambition, but with Lily, he was present for everything: the first smile, the first step, the long, sleepless nights filled with crying and rocking, singing softly into the dark. Mia started working part-time again at a local bookstore. She came home exhausted but smiling. Some days she brought home poetry books and read them aloud while Alan made dinner. Lily would sit between them on the rug, babbling to her stuffed animals. They never said it out loud, but something had changed between them. One night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Mia sat across from Alan at the table. Her eyes were red, not from tears, but from courage. She said, "You know this isn't normal. None of it. People look at us and think we're broken or strange." Alan looked at her, his face calm. "Maybe we are, but I don't care." "I do," she whispered. "Sometimes I feel guilty, like I've stolen your future." Alan reached across the table and gently took her hand. "Mia, I didn't have a future before I came here. You gave me one." Silence lingered between them. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Inside, warmth settled over the room like a thick, invisible blanket. From that night on, they stopped avoiding what they were. They were family. Not by blood, not by law, but by choice. And that, Alan realized, was more powerful than anything. Months passed. Lily turned 1. Mia threw a small birthday party with cupcakes and handmade decorations. Alan built a wooden rocking horse and painted it himself. Neighbors came. Some still whispered, but most had grown used to the odd family at the end of the block. A local journalist, who had seen Mia's original post, asked if they'd share their story again. This time, Mia agreed. The article was titled, "The Man Who Chose Love Over Labels." Once again, the internet reacted. Some judged, some cried, some sent messages saying thank you. "I needed to see this today." One comment stood out, and Mia read it aloud that evening. "Maybe love doesn't always fit in the boxes we're taught. Maybe love is just showing up, over and over again." Alan smiled at that. It was exactly what he had done. Just shown up. For Lily, for Mia, for himself. They never married. They never labeled what they were. But in the quiet spaces between sunrise and bedtime, they built something stronger than most. Years later, when Lily started school, she brought a drawing of her family to class. Two figures holding hands, and a little girl between them. "This is my mommy," she told the teacher. "And this is Alan. He's not my dad. He's my always." The teacher didn't correct her, because some truths don't need grammar. They just need heart. Alan, now in his late 60s, sometimes sat on the porch watching Lily chase butterflies across the yard. Mia would sit beside him, coffee in hand, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. They rarely spoke about the past anymore. They didn't need to, because every laugh from Lily, every sunset they shared, every tired moment where they leaned on each other was a quiet affirmation that love doesn't always come in straight lines. That sometimes, family is something you build with your own hands when the world refuses to give you one. And in that small house, at the edge of a noisy world, lived 3 people. Bound not by names, not by law, but by something far more enduring. Promise. To never let each other go. Thank you for watching today. If this story moved you in any way, we invite you to reflect, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes the most unexpected stories are the ones we need most. Until next time.